All right. Got to let everything breathe while we get the Facebook channels in here, as we do every night. Now just waiting for some green check marks. Green check marks. There's one. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Dove Valley Deep Divers. I am your host, Erick Trickel, and joining me tonight is Kenneth Booker, the co-host of the Dove Valley Deep Divers, the new co-host of it. Well, not so new anymore. I guess you've kind of gotten your feet wet, more than wet here. How you doing tonight?
I'm doing good, Eric. Just getting ready for the weekend. There was a couple little weekend things going on. There's like it's like a celebration of Japanese culture thing going on this weekend, and then there's also a barbecue fest downtown in Civic Center
Nice.
Park. So I might
Yeah,
check it out.
I gotta say one thing. Living in Alaska, that I absolutely hate. We don't have good barbecue up here. We have like no barbecue places anywhere near where I live. So, and I'm a huge barbecue fan. So anytime I go down to the lower 48 hours, got to get barbecue at some point because we just don't have it up here.
Yeah, we'll check it out when you come down for the meet and greet if you can make it down there. I
All
know a
right.
couple places.
Yeah, I mean, I've looked on like Uber and Grubhub and all that the couple times I've been down there, but with me going down there, it's always so busy because I get down there and then basically when I get down there, we go out to the Mile High Huddle dinner. Then it's back and I'm so exhausted. It's bedtime.
Yeah,
It's chaotic, but definitely keep trying to. Hopefully this year, it's something that I'm able to do, especially with how early I get in this time. I
I
have a
know a place really close to the hotel you guys are staying at too. So
awesome. All right. Well, this weekend, talking about things going on this weekend, is the finale of the preseason. We know the starting quarterback now, and Sean Payton today flat out said that the starters, for the most part, aren't going to be playing. We're going to see a couple of them. He mentioned Brandon Jones, who we haven't seen yet this preseason. He mentioned Levi Wallace, who also we haven't seen this preseason, as they both have been dealing with a hamstring injury. So we're going to see a little bit of them. But for me, this is the game that is really telling about how the roster is going to look. Because if guys don't play, they're making the roster basically. That's pretty much a guarantee unless some, late trade happens to come, which you get basically not with every team every year, but you get a couple of those every year throughout the 32 teams. And then you kind of get a better idea of the order of the depth chart for these players.
mhm.
And getting into this game, the big one is, do they keep three quarterbacks? Do they keep two? And who's that second one going to be? Who is going to be the backup to Bo Nix?
Yeah, that's definitely a tough question because you got you know what you got in City. You know he's consistent. He'll move the chains. He might win you a couple games. He'll keep you in the game. So where Zach Wilson's the cheaper guy, but he's the younger of the two, the gunslinger, the more talented. Um, he's either going to win you games or he's going to get you blown out. So I think he's shown a lot of progression. So I'm leaning towards Zach Wilson, the money wise, and how we can reallocate that money to other positions in need. But I see, unless Zach Wilson just really does bad, because what did they say? Stidham's going to play like the first
He'll
quarter,
play like a series.
and then
Like,
Zach Wilson's the rest of the time. So
yeah.
Zach Wilson just has to be consistent.
Yeah. And real quick, we got a super chat coming in from David Papa Bear McElrath with $5. Thank you, David. We appreciate that. He says, good evening, Broncos country. Lance, Eric, and Deacon Scott. Papa Bear, it's Kenneth. But no, I mean, it's definitely hard to break that. I mean, I just the other day I told my wife, mentioned a comment about doing a show with Lance this Friday when I was meeting. It was Wednesday, and Lance and I we've been doing recorded shows, and I was
Yeah,
meeting Wednesday night. I have to do that with Lance. I said Friday just out of habit, but anyways, he says hashtag GBUSA. I'm not sure what that hashtag is. Hashtag 12 and 5, hashtag Buckham times 3. That's a Buckham, not with the B, not, not the other one. Hashtag FHH for life, hashtag Denver Broncos for life, and hashtag Knicks for 6. And going back to what you were saying about Zach Wilson, with the amount of time that he's getting, he isn't competing with Jarrett Stidham for a roster spot, I don't think. He's competing with himself. He can
yes,
either make it as a second quarterback or third, or force them to keep three quarterbacks, or he can play himself off the roster.
definitely. It's a tough one to him because playing it safe could be just as bad. Just to show he has no confidence that he's good enough and he's taking that next step to become a productive backup NFL quarterback. So we'll see. But I'm hoping for him just because of all the tools that he has.
Yeah,
I feel like he's got a lot higher ceiling than Stidham. But I'm the risk taker, I guess. I would rather risk for the higher ceiling.
yeah. I mean, it's definitely a fun conversation to have because something you said also a little bit ago about this is Stidham. He's not a guy that's going to go out there and necessarily win you games, but he's not going to necessarily cost you games either. Whereas Zach Wilson can either go out there and win you the game or cost you the game.
Mm-hmm.
It's definitely this thing of like, here's the range for Jarrett Stidham and here's this range for Zach Wilson for what you're going to get out of them. And if you can just get Zach Wilson to be more consistent, he could be a fine quarterback in the NFL. But the issue is we just have never seen that consistency. Well, he's looked better in the last preseason game than he did the first one. The consistency still isn't quite there. We still have those bad moments. And I will say that the safety he gave up, that was all on the offensive line. That was a terrible play from, I believe, Will Sherman, who just absolutely got beat on his block, pulled too far, like just so many mistakes from Will Sherman on it that led to that. And so also have to balance that out. How much of this is the fault of the quarterback? How much of this is the fault of those around him? And Michael Ronquillo coming in saying, good evening, Eric and Kenneth on the Dove Valley Deep Divers. Go Broncos.
Go Michael.
Well, we can't see it because we don't have Scott with us tonight. Michael, I know these are normally have stars attached to them. So if we don't get any that have stars attached to it, I apologize. I just can't see it. I don't have Facebook up. Facebook for me on my computer is being weird. And we don't have Scott here with us to, mark out which ones not, which ones are stars and which ones aren't. And then David Youngkin asked which quarterback would we want, Stidham or Wilson? See, I'm a little bit of the opposite of you, Kenneth. You mentioned how you're kind of a little bit of that risk taker. I'm kind of more content with going with the safer option here at quarterback, and just using that and using because he doesn't have a bad football IQ, and just using him as a sounding board for Bo Nix off the field, I think is great. But I'm also very big about the financials, and I know that you save more money by moving on from Jarrett Stidham and keeping Zach Wilson than the other way around. So I'm a little torn. I do lean Stidham, but I'd be fine either way at this point because both of them have their pros and cons.
I think if you go back to the last Super Bowl year we had, the Brock Osweiler situation, I think I would rather have Stidham in that situation than a Zach Wilson, because he's just trying to win you a couple games and keep you in the hunt, keep you at your level where you're fighting for that number one seed. And it would be pretty shaky with a Zach Wilson with all that pressure on him. I think Stidham would handle the pressure much better, though.
Yeah, we have William Catalano coming in saying, hasn't Stiddy thrown more picks than Wilson so far, though, in this preseason? Yes, because Stiddy has thrown 2 technically, but neither one of them were his fault. Like, one of them literally bounced out of Samaje Perine's hands, and the other one you could put a little bit on him, but the offensive lineman got beat. The guy got into the throwing lane, put his hands up, got it batted, and just bounced, unlucky bounce into the defender's hands. So I mean, I guess so. You could say that, but again, one of those interceptions 100% is not on Stidham. Yeah,
the first one was like a Three Stooges type thing. It was so ridiculous on how it's just like whoop 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 whoop, and then it just ended up in the other team's hands. But with him having that, I don't see him like recurring him trying to make up for a turnover. I do see Zach Wilson trying to force something in there to make up for a turnover. I keep talking myself out of Zach Wilson, even though I like him better. But well, I don't know. We'll see. I'm going to take the chance on Zach Wilson, especially since it's less money.
Yeah, which again, totally understandable. I'm very big about that. It's one of the reasons why I wouldn't say I have it out for them, but it's one reason why I'm hesitant to cement DJ Jones on this roster because of how much he can save by cutting him and how bad he's been this preseason. And Tremon Smith, he's another one you can save a little bit of money. You can get younger. And well, he's a good special teams player. And I think that you can replicate that with somebody else. So I can go I can go either way with this. And then there was another comment here that I wanted to grab before we get into this. Here we go from Patrick. Aloha, Patrick. He says, Aloha, Eric and Mr. Booker. Final guesstimation for this season's record. I believe we talked about this a little bit last week about kind of where the range, I guess, where we have the Broncos. But giving a cement guesstimation for this season record, I think that they just edge out a winning season at 9-8. I think that's where if I had to, cement a record, it'd be 9-8 for me.
Yeah, that's a rough one. I'm a lifelong Bronco fan, so I'm a little bit optimistic and biased towards the Broncos, but I do see them hopefully squeaking out 10 wins, but the last couple years I've said that it's gone the complete opposite. We'll see. I think just the steadiness of Bo Nix and then the way he can move the chains and can keep drives going, I think it'll help out the entire team, including the defense. So I'm going to go with 10 wins.
Yeah.
And what's that called? What's that called? And a wild card appearance for the first time in a while.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, the AFC's tough. We don't know what we're going to get out of the Chargers this year.
We know what we're going to get out of the Chargers. Nothing. They never do anything.
The issue with the Chargers is for what feels like the last 15 years, they've had an amazing team on paper. They didn't just get sidelined by injuries or sideswiped by injuries and bad coaching. And at least with Harbaugh, I don't think we're going to get the bad coaching element of it. Mm-hmm. Injuries are so unpredictable. Like, this is a team that they could easily go out and win 11 plus games, or they can go out and win 4 games because they get a bunch of injuries. It's so hard with the Chargers. The Raiders, I'm not expecting a lot out of. I think they'll be in contention for one of the worst teams this year, just because they're the offense. Gardner Minshew's their starting quarterback, but I think outside of him, I don't think that they'll have the running game that they need to help take pressure off of him like he has had in the past. Their defense, I think they have serious questions and gaps in the secondary. I mean, they have an elite defensive front. That pass rush is going to be insane, but how much can that cover the issues in the secondary? And then the Chiefs are the Chiefs. So, we could eke out a win. We could go 0-2. We can go 2-0 because we always play the Chiefs pretty tough for the most part. So the division is tough. The AFC is tough. Their schedule is, I don't want to say it's brutal, but it's not, very favorable for them either, especially that week 14, week 15 bye week. That is really rough. Especially if you suffer some of these minor injuries early in preseason or early in the regular season, which we've kind of seen a couple of them have. With Josh Reynolds was held out of practice today with a what was the wording that was used, with wear and tear on his Achilles tendon. So that is something to keep an eye out on. But yeah, I mean, it's always so tough. I mean, records before we even get to the regular season, record predictions are always tough. I think last year I had them at like 7 wins last year, entering the season. So yeah, I mean, records are just tough, but I do think that at least winning 8 games, it would be a success for both Sean Payton and Bo Nix, provided Bo Nix doesn't go out there completely sneak it up and get benched. Knock on wood, that doesn't happen. I'm not rooting for that to happen. I think that's about the minimum you're looking for a successful season this year.
Yes, it looks like Williams around the same, 8 or 9 wins, or 8 and 9 this year. I had 17. So yeah, what I really want is I just want to be competitive late in the season. I want to play meaningful games late in the season. If you win them, you win them. It's awesome. If you lose them, you lose them. But I just don't want to be planning stuff on Sundays when there's still 2 weeks left in the season, because I know there's just no hope.
Yeah. I definitely hear you there. And then Mike Gettle coming in with a $2 donation. Thank you, Mike. We appreciate that. Asking me if I've changed my mind about Jonah Elliss. So I wasn't super high on Jonah Elliss coming out just because I think he's a very limited pass rusher. He's very limited as a run defender. You can use him in coverage. And he was very similar to what the Broncos were already having, what the Broncos already had. They have a lot of quick athletic pass rushers, but nobody that can really set up a solid edge, consistently hold that point of attack. And we haven't seen that from Jonah Elliss. He has not been that good against the run. He's had some moments, but it's always been a slashing type play from him where he's cutting across the face of the blocker using his athleticism and quickness to go and make the play. And as a pass rusher, he and Nick Bonito look like a great pairing because of how they use their athleticism. And the issue with Jonah Elliss, and I've seen him get a lot of praise for this, he still needs a lot of work with some of his pass rush moves, and he's got to get this habit he has of trying to bull rush through tackles consistently. I mean, he leads the team in pressures this preseason. He has 6 pressures, which is great. But if he stopped trying to bull rush, he could be looking at the double digits already. Like against the Colts, there were like 5 plays in a row where he's just trying to bull rush through them and barely getting any penetration. I am more optimistic about his future. I just want to see more growth and development out of him. And I think that his role this year, it's going to be limited. He's the 4th edge rusher. And obviously this is a bet for seeing how he grows this year, a bet for next year when you have Baron Browning and Jonathan Cooper both on the final year of their deals.
I've been excited to see him when he's played. He's made some pretty big plays. He's just a young guy that just needs to fine tool and refine everything. But the effort is there, the will is there, the drive. We'll see. Since we don't really have a really veteran pass rush group or edge rushing group, we'll see who he leans on to continue to grow. I guess it's just the defensive line and the edge coaches and stuff like that. But I have high hopes for him. I didn't know him too much coming out of college, but when I've seen him play, I'm like, whoa. He kind of pops out here and there where you would think like later in the season he's going to be one of those guys that comes up with those crucial sacks like Derek Wolfe would every once in a while.
Yeah, and then another issue I had with him was that he wasn't the most reliable with staying out there on the field in college. Multiple injuries sidelined him for the last 3 seasons. And I mean, when we look at the room, Baron Browning has had that issue. Nick Bonito has had that issue. Jonathan Cooper's had that issue. So again, it's just kind of going back to that thing of I wasn't a big fan of that pick because it was just much more of the same of what Denver already has. And one thing that is I always look at when I am, trying to build a roster mentally, granted, I don't get paid to build rosters, but from an analysis point, what I look to do is try to find complementary skill sets.
Mm-hmm.
You have your speed athletic rushers. Now get yourself a power rusher from the edge. They don't have that. Get somebody who can defend the run against off the edge. They don't have that. And they haven't brought that in. So that to me is, it's still a concern. But I am as I said, I am far more optimistic about Jonah Elliss going forward than I was in April, end of April, early May after we drafted him. Another, talking about some of these battles that are going on, we talked about the quarterback position, and then we got asked about Jonah Elliss. There's another one on the defensive side of the ball, or 2 of them on the defensive side of the ball, I should say, that seem settled. It seems like when we're looking at the defensive starters, we're going to have Cody Barton next to Alex Singleton, and we're going to have Riley Moss opposite Patrick Surtain. And the reason why I bring this up is because I found it very interesting that when Sean Payton was asked about the starters playing, he mentioned Levi Wallace. So I'm really wondering, and I want to get your opinion on this, can Levi Wallace win that starting job back from Riley Moss with a good showing against the Cardinals?
Oh, it's like too little too late. It's definitely like a situation where you'll see, okay, he's got it. We can work him into some packages and stuff like that. But he's it's just too late. Riley Moss is locked up the spot. You still had Damari Mathis. Levi Wallace is the veteran of the group. that you would think that would have had a better chance if he would have played the whole preseason. But right now, it's the only way he's going to take it is if Riley Moss struggles in the beginning of the season, and they just want somebody who's a little more sure that they can depend on to be that cornerback too, because they're going to be getting targeted all day, every day, opposite of Patrick Surtain.
Yeah, and for me, I'm similar to you with this. It's been almost right around 3 weeks since Levi Wallace has even practiced since he suffered the hamstring injury, missed both games with it. For me, it's not a question if he can win the starter. It's a question if he can play well enough to show he deserves a roster spot.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I'm looking at with him, because corner, if you look at the way the room is built, it looks pretty tough and competitive there, because even though I am all for cutting him to save money, Tremont Smith does offer a reliable gunner. Chris Abrams-Drain has been playing really well. Reese Taylor, who has been the primary backup nickel behind Jaquan McMillan, has been playing really well. And then Riley Moss, Damari Mathis, Patrick Surtain. You have 7 or 8 guys who can realistically look at as making this roster, with Levi Wallace included. So to me, he's got to go out there and earn a roster spot still, and not be handed one because he's a veteran who has been all right for his career. So to me, I don't think there's a chance for him to win the starting job back. I think he's going to be fighting to be that one of those, the primary backup, maybe the guy who they, might turn to if Riley Moss struggles, as you said. But before that, he's got to show he can make the roster. We have Eric Flynn coming in with some stars on Facebook. No comment with that. So if you have a comment, Eric, make sure you bring that in and we will get to it. We appreciate your support.
I saw one I liked over here. So I'm seeing Rodney Garcia said, I'm seeing Tim Patrick leading the team with 11 touchdowns. I have really high hopes for Tim Patrick. I don't know why, for some reason, the injury bug isn't really bothering me right now. I just think he's just super driven. He finds a way to get open. He's the number 2, so he doesn't get as much attention as a Cortland Sutton. Yeah. But I see him really, maybe not 11 touchdowns, but 7 or 8 in some crucial moments. I just have high hopes for the guy.
Yeah, it's a bummer because 2 injuries that you just can't predict. I mean, those are injuries that you can do everything right, and just somebody else just hit you in the wrong way. You fall the wrong way, and bam, you're done for the season. And
the worst part about them is they're all usually like non-contact.
Yeah. So it's just a bummer that he's been hurt the last few years. I've had high expectations for him. I'm glad they were able to rework a deal and bring him back, because there was no way he was back on this team with the contract that he was on.
Oh no,
like there was no way. They had to redo it or he was gone. But I absolutely do love the way they're using him, and you kind of touched on it. He's the number 2 receiver, but when they go into 3 wide receiver sets, he's the one that moves into slot with Josh Reynolds coming out.
Oh, okay.
And I think that he can be such a mismatch maker in the slot because of his size, and he's a pretty solid route runner and has pretty good quickness and pretty good speed to just challenge whatever you're going to throw at him in the slot. You're going to throw a nickel corner at him, well, he's got a size advantage. You're going to throw a safety over him, he's got the quickness and the speed over the majority of safeties in the NFL. So I love the way that they're using him. They're kind of looking at him. We talked about this a lot last year about Greg Dulcich, about this joker who's the mismatch dictator. That seems to be a combination of Tim Patrick and Greg Dulcich still, that to kind of be those guys for the Broncos this year. Because, man, one thing is for sure, I know there's a lot of Lucas Kroll hype out there, but there is not a tight end on this roster that can replace what Greg Dulcich can do when he's out there on the field. Like, Lucas Kroll has been fine. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying he's been terrible. I'm not saying, but he hasn't been great. The fumble he had against the Colts, that was a little bit bothersome. Didn't secure the ball. Got popped. It popped out. But he just doesn't move the same way. He isn't quite the same kind of athlete as Greg Dulcich is. So I am really curious to see, once we get to the regular season, just how Sean Payton works Tim Patrick and Greg Dulcich together, provided they're both, able to stay healthy, of course.
Yeah, Greg Dulcich is he's the one where everybody is just hoping for, because when he does play, he does perform. He's not like a Noah Fant where, you think he's super talented. He gets out there and he just never gets any balls. Like they're looking for Dulcich.
Yeah.
So if he can stay healthy, I definitely see him just helping out everybody else with that, with the Cortland Suttons and the Tim Patricks, just giving them a little more space, whatever, because he can be a weapon. Even if it's like the 5 yard, he can turn it up the field, and as a tight end, he can still take it for 40 or 50 yards. He's not one of those guys who's too lumbering, who's going to get caught from behind. But yeah, I'm excited to see if he can stay healthy, because he's definitely, the sky's the limit for that guy, but we'll see.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing, is like, it's not like Tim Patrick where the injuries have been freak injuries, and multiple, like Tim Patrick had injury concerns going back to college. It's been for the most part, one injury, hamstrings, both legs, that even bothered him in college for Greg Dulcich, and then he's working come back, and then he hurts a foot. So it's all these things. And then they talked about how he saw specialists to help him change the way he runs with the added weight that he's put on over the last few years, even going back to college, to help cut back on that. And so far it seems to work out, but hamstrings are very tricky. They can just, sometimes you're just running and they just happen. It's just a absolute bummer. And hopefully that he's able to, hopefully he has been able to put that behind him. Michael Rinquillo coming in asking me, but I'm going to ask you this too. Are you still bummed that linebacker Drew Sanders ain't playing for the Broncos yet? Was the NFL draft pick of linebacker Drew Sanders a miss for the Broncos? I'm not bummed. I think it's a bummer he got hurt. I think it was a bummer that they were non-committal about where he was going to play. Is he an edge? Is he a linebacker? I that really bothered me. It's just cement him in one spot, have him learn that spot, and then go from there. I wouldn't say he's a miss for the Broncos yet, but for me, he's definitely trending that direction. And it's unfortunate that the injury is a part of the reason for that.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. He was just so talented. Even out of high school, he went to Alabama initially, but the linebacker room was so packed there that he transferred over to, was it Arkansas?
Yep.
Yeah, we had really high hopes for him. I knew he was going to have some struggles coming out of college, just adjusting to the game and the speed and stuff like that. But right now, this should be the year where everything is clicking for him. And but the injuries put a little bit of hold on that, and we'll see. But I really want to see him more on the inside. I know he is a valuable edge rusher if he can be, or if he can stay on the field. But I just feel like we just one after the other. They're not the greatest edge guys, whatever, but they're all productive guys. And I feel like on the inside is the one that it's like, maybe you have a lot of experience at the inside. Just let's put you on the inside for a while, and we'll work you on the outside in certain pass rush situations. But right now, we need somebody who's a staple, who's not going to move for a long time. But yeah, we'll see. I have a high hopes for Drew Sanders. Crazy athletic, crazy talent, but just can't stay healthy.
Yeah, I mean, it is a bummer. I mean, and then going back to it, I mean, at Alabama, as you mentioned, he was playing outside. He was playing with the edge room, and Alabama is so consistent. Like, when you talk about edge rusher university, Alabama's got to be up there with the guys that they've put out in recent years. He moved to Arkansas. He started off at the edge and then was moved in during spring training to linebacker. So he only had one season as a linebacker at Arkansas. Then he comes into Denver. They start training him as a linebacker. And then to end the season, they put him at edge. And that was outside of like 2 plays or 2 games, or can't remember exactly what it was. There was a couple plays where he looked really good. But then after that, he just does not look like an edge. But you can still utilize his ability as a pass rusher, as a blitzer from the inside, similarly to how they did with Josie Jewell last year.
Nice.
And Alex Singleton even. So there was still value for him, from a linebacker. But yeah, it's just a shame with how the way they've done him with not committing to him in one spot, and then also the injury as well. Malachi Martin asking, what's everyone's score prediction against Seahawks? That is over 2 weeks away, right? That's the 7th, or the 8th, right? So come back and ask us on the 6th when it's the Friday before the thing, because right now we don't even know who's going to make the roster.
True.
We don't even know who's going to make the roster for Seattle. And it's funny too. I don't know how much you pay attention to the Seattle Seahawks. But one thing that I've seen being floated out there on Twitter, and it's not going to happen. Geno Smith is their starting quarterback, but there are a lot of people screaming for Sam Howell to be their starting quarterback. And that absolutely cracks me up.
Yeah. Being a Geno Smith is rough. Because you're like, he's a young star quarterback. He's going to be coming up and stuff like that. But once you're relegated to like a backup role and then you win the role over somebody like a Drew Lock who still just never had it all together, you're always going to be looking over your shoulder no matter what. You could throw 4 touchdowns one game and 1 touchdown the next game. And if you went out for a little tweak or somebody comes in and throws 2 touchdowns, the whole city just turns on you. So you got to keep riding with Geno. Sam Howell is a hell of a quarterback to have as your backup quarterback. He's a serviceable starter, but really good backup. So you just got to ride with Geno. He knows the offense. He's been playing in it forever. So that's why I would go with.
Sam Howell is a tremendous upgrade over their previous backup quarterback.
Oh, a single tear is rolling down his face right now.
So since I mentioned him, just because, every now and then I find a way to kind of, talk bad about him a little bit. Drew Lock has been absolutely terrible this preseason for the New York Giants, making the same mistakes we saw him making as a rookie. And this is one of the things too, is like, you always talk about wanting to see growth and progression. And man, that just has never been seen from Drew Lock. And you can get into the way he was treated here, and was he treated poorly? Was he treated? He wasn't, but some people believe he was. That's your choice. But yeah, I mean, he just was never able to put it together, which is an issue when one of the big concerns coming out is, can you put it all together? Can you figure it out mentally? Which one of the reasons why I am excited and hopeful about Bo Nix is that we don't have to worry. That's not a question about him. It's not a question if he can put it together mentally and figure things out mentally. That was one of the biggest praises that anybody who watched him had for him, is he picked things up quickly and he was able to execute things at a pretty high level.
I feel like the difference between Nix and Locke is like Nix is more of a leader and Locke has to be told what to do.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise it just gets him into trouble. He looks too big. Where Nix is like, he's like a second coach on the field.
Yeah.
But
and yeah, Locke got hurt. He got hurt prior to either in their first preseason game or in the practice leading up to their second preseason game. But he did play in the first one, and it was not good. Had an interception, had another turnover-worthy play, threw for less than 20 yards on like 3 or 4 completions. It wasn't very good, but
it's funny seeing Nix roll out. It reminded me when Locke rolled out his preseason year, the rookie. He tried to get that extra couple yards, and he ended up spraining his thumb or something like that.
Yeah.
And it was the complete opposite with Nix. He didn't slide or anything, but he had that little extra speed to get to out of bounds. One of them, he did get taken down out of bounds, but
yeah,
I was like, when he ran on the corner, I was like, no, in my head. I just thought about that Locke situation, but Nix is a little bit smarter. It gets a little bit deeper in the pocket to get that extra step or two around the corner.
And this is the difference between Nix and Wilson, Nix and Locke. Nix doesn't like to hang around the pocket too long. When things start to break down with protection, he is pretty quick to get out of there, which that is great to see because we didn't get to see that a whole lot at Oregon because they were one of the teams who allowed the fewest pressures, but it also helped because of how quickly they got the ball out because of the way that offense was designed. So that was something that I wanted to see from Bo Nix this preseason, and of how long would he hang out around in the pocket? Would it be too long, or would he find that just right spot? And it's been that just right spot. Mm-hmm. But we have Todd Ossendorf coming in with a quick question. What do I tell people when they say Seattle is Alaska's team? I tell them the history of television in the state of Alaska. That when Alaska first got television, it was joined with the Denver, the Denver's channels. So we got every single Broncos game. This was before I was born. But even with where I lived after I was born, it was still connected to the Colorado Denver area, and so we got all the Broncos games. That's not what made me a Broncos fan, though. That was my grandfather in the Packers Super Bowl. I was a Packers fan at the time, and now that was 97 was when they actually played the game. So I would have been 5 at the time. We were down there, and I cheered for the Packers. I was 5 years old. He set me out on the front porch and locked me out of the house.
We have a similar, like, who we used to like. My first team was Green Bay when I was like 5 years old. My aunt bought me and my cousin like these football helmets from a yard sale, and I had Green Bay, but I thought they were called the Green Bean Packers. So for like 2 years, as I was a little kid, I thought they were the Green Bean Packers, but I stopped liking them around, I don't know, like 15 or 16 or something like that. And a few years later, I'm always like the Broncos, but a few years later, the Broncos took over. And when they played each other, that's when it completely ended my relationship with the Packers.
Yeah, and again, a similar story on that. Green Bean. Mine was when I was younger, I had a bit of a speech impediment. And my P's came out sounding like F's. And the rest of that was a curse. So it was, I can't say the word, but yeah. So that's what they were for me. And then, yeah, I mean, it was my grandfather passing and being around my family after that led to me being more of a Broncos fan. And I remember in the playoff game after the 2005 season against the Pittsburgh Steelers, I got really into poker for some reason at 13 years old.
Okay.
And I had a set of poker chips in me because I was just messing around with them, trying to do all these cool little tricks that I was, seeing on TV during the World Poker Championship or whatever it was that was on ESPN at the time. And I got so mad over something that I absolutely destroyed the tin. I messed up my hand, and just the chips were scattered throughout the house, and I pouted for a week.
Oh man. I was gonna see if do we have any questions for the fans today?
I don't see any questions. I don't have any questions for the fans at the moment, but I do have another question about, the quarterback position, or the Broncos camp battles. Excuse me. I think it's very clear that Luke Wattenberg is the starting center.
Mm-hmm.
How are we feeling about Alex Forsyth fighting to make the roster now? He went from fan favorite to be the starter to, does he make the roster? Because Sam Mustipher was a third center against the Colts, and then he was very clearly the second center against the Green Bay Packers.
That's got to be rough to have all the confidence you're not for sure going to make the team, but you have a great feeling about it, and now it all comes down to the last game. We'll see. If it comes down to where it's like a really close battle between the two, maybe they go with Forsyth because of the familiarity with Nix, but I don't know. Just because he played with him doesn't mean he should get the job, though. So
yeah, and that's one thing is, like, whenever we talked about it, back in like June and July about this camp battle at it, or who should be the starting center, we always mentioned Alex Forsyth, and that part of it was having that chemistry down with Bo Nix. But that is not the whole story. Apparently, he is struggling with the mental side of it, and when you turn on the tape, you can see him struggling with the physical side of it. In the end, I would be surprised if it's a situation where, Wattenberg and Mustipher are the two centers on the roster, and then Forsyth gets waived, and then they try to bring him back on the practice squad and just continue to develop him and see what he can do next year if he can step up and be that guy as the backup center. And Chase Wollner asking, no value for Forsyth as guard depth. His play at guard has been terrible as well.
Man, that's rough.
It's just it's been rough no matter where he's lined up at. He's played 46 snaps, I believe, at center, and then 33 total snaps at guard, split 11 at left, I believe, at left guard, and 22 at right guard. Those may be flipped though. He's been terrible. And then Sam Mustipher, he has starting guard experience. He started as a guard in the NFL and did better there than he was at center, though still not great. And it wasn't hard for him to do better than he did at center. So he brings depth there. And then Calvin Throckmorton, he's been killing it at guard. He's been one of the better looking offensive linemen this preseason. So he's got the backup swing guard spot held up. So
okay.
Yeah, it's a rough spot for Alex Forsyth to be in. Hopefully things can turn around for him if they do keep him around on the practice squad. If not, Dylan Von Ark's coming and saying Forsyth was a 7th rounder for a reason. Part of that a big part of that reason was an injury. All right. There was a lot of hype about him. There was a lot of analysts who felt that he would go earlier than that, but fell because of the injury. But there is a reason why he was never viewed as one of the top centers of that class. It was always somewhere, for the most part, day 3 grade for Alex Forsyth, and for that is guys that, okay, maybe you gotta try to develop him and turn him into something.
Didn't we miss out on a couple guys by just like a pick or two? Was it Hennessy or no? That was with Cushionberry, I think.
There is a long track record of the Broncos eyeballing centers, starting with the whole Lloyd Cushionberry thing. They were sitting at pick 77, I believe, and they traded down to 83 because Matt Hennessy is still there out of Temple, I believe. And the next pick was Matt Hennessy. And they had another guy that they liked that I believe was picked at like 79 or 80, and then they ended up settling for Lloyd Cushionberry. Then in the year they drafted Quinn Miners and Baron Browning, it wasn't a center, but they were traded down in hopes that Spencer Brown would fall to them. They missed out on him. Then they tried to trade up for Cam Jurgens. They tried to trade up for John Michael Schmitz, and they tried to trade up for the Wisconsin center from like 2 years ago.
Oh my God, I can't think of it now.
Dahlman, I think. I think his name was Dahlman. I can't remember off the top.
I'm thinking of the tackle, whatever. Was it Ramczyk he used to play for?
Ramczyk, yeah, it was for the Saints. Joe Dahlman, I believe that's his name. I can't remember where he went, but there was a lot of talk about Denver wanting him because they were really trying to upgrade over Lloyd Cushionberry for 2 years and just failed and got stuck with Lloyd Cushionberry. And instead they bet on drafting later guys who they could try to develop in Luke Wattenberg and then Alex Forsyth. And, well, Luke Wattenberg's a starter, but we'll still see what he brings.
What's the biggest one that we missed out on of those guys? Like this Spencer Brown?
I would say Spencer Brown. He's been the best. Matt Hennessy has been terrible. John Michael Schmitz, I believe, is still a backup. And then Cam Jurgens, he did great at guard for Philly. He's moving into center with Jason Kelsey retiring. But, the biggest miss that the Broncos had in recent years was Fred Warner.
Oh.
They were on the phone with Fred Warner when San Francisco called to draft him the pick before they took Royce Freeman.
Wow. I was thinking about that too, with all the money that's with all the contracts with the Stidham and the Pete Ryan. Like, is there a linebacker out there? I know Fred Warner definitely. He's you have to trade a starting quarterback to get him, but man, that would have been crazy. It's like we missed out Kelsey too. I think on one of them, or no, Kittle.
We took Jake Buck instead. Yeah, but it's mentioned that you made the comment about trading for a linebacker because I was reading. Let me see if I can't find it so I can pull up and accurately quote him here. Mike Klitz put out an article today about, I believe it was today, about things to watch in the Denver Broncos finale. And one of them, it was 3 things. One of them was settled remaining position battles. And they said, it also looks like Cody Barton has the inside linebacker position next to Alex Singleton, providing the Broncos don't try to acquire another veteran linebacker via trade or waiver wire. So to me, that reads that Cody Barton is the starter, but they are very much trying to find somebody else to bring in and take over as starter, because Cody Barton has been fine, but my God, this dude has been so passive against the run. It is infuriating.
It's like I don't know, Cody Barnes, like the girlfriend, whatever, but the boyfriend still has a Tinder account. Like they're still out there looking, whatever. I don't know who they would pick up. There's some people out there you can make some trades for. But they're just too pricey. They're like more veteran kind of guys who took advantage of a big contract, but they're kind of not playing up to it, or they are, but it's just too much of a just too much of money going to that one player. So, because I was looking at some of them, like I saw like CJ Mosley, but he makes a ton of money. He's still playing really well though.
Yeah, he is.
But I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. The other player I would think about picking up is like another safety.
Yeah, I would definitely be eyeballing the safety. I think there are still some decent quality starting caliber safeties out there in the free agent market. But going to the linebackers, I am not familiar with other teams' potential cuts or anything like that of guys who may be let go. But you mentioned CJ Mosley, and I think that he is one that has a realistic shot of being waived or traded. And just for the salary cap numbers here, if they trade for him, he will count $6 million against the salary cap this year, and then it will balloon up a little bit over the next couple of years. And if I remember right, the Jets do have a couple of other linebackers that have been playing pretty good football or great football. That is what is potentially making CJ Mosley available. Because they have Quincy Williams, who's been great, and then I believe Zaire Barnes has been looking really good. So maybe CJ Mosley is one that they could be eyeballing as trying to go and get. And Zach Powers coming in. Tippmann, thank you. Tippmann was the Wisconsin center that I was trying to think of. Thank you, Zach. I appreciate that because it really was driving me nuts.
Oh, somebody's talking about Reuben Foster. I was really rooting for Reuben Foster until I heard about all his baggage.
Trying to fight the medical staff at the combine, that was what really turned me off on him.
He was a first-round pick. He just had to just go to practice, go home, chill out, just stay out of the craziness. He was so talented, but yeah, just a mental case, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the things too, like whenever we're doing the evaluations pre-draft is we don't get all of that information. And only reason why we got it CJ Mosley came out was because I remember I was watching the NFL Network, and from where they were doing an interview, you could hear the shouting going on outside of it. And then like 5 minutes later, whoever they're interviewing came out and said that, made a comment about Reuben Foster getting into it with medical staff. Jeez. And so that side of things, that's always so hard to evaluate. And it is such a big part of NFL teams' evaluations, the character, the off field, the intelligence. And it is one of the hardest things without meeting these guys, without speaking to them face to face, without getting all this extra information, having to, dig and scrape for what little bit of information we can get, can make these so difficult.
Micah Parsons was a big one for that too. I was like,
Micah Parsons is a rough one to talk about.
The story behind that was brutal.
Yeah.
I hope none of that was true, because I don't want anybody to have to experience something like that. But yeah, he ended up turning it around though. He seems like he's doing pretty well now. So hopefully,
yeah, I mean, it was never a question of his play. He was always a phenomenal player. It was just always the attitude, mental sides of it that were always the question.
Mm-hmm.
So, now, before we get out of here, is there anything else that you want to talk about when it comes to this upcoming preseason game or roster cutdowns or anything like that?
No, I'm just trying to see if Zach Wilson can stay steady to hold on to it, onto the position for backup. I'm trying to see if any of these guys who lost their positions, starting positions like a Damari Mathis, whatever, how it affects them. Did they come out and show out? Did they kind of shell up? And then I'm just ready for the weekend. I'm gonna cook some good food for it. I actually just got, what did I get? Some like mango habanero chicken seasoning. So I'm gonna break that out this week. So
that sounds really good. with what you were kind of talking about seeing what happens with some of these players that may have lost their battle or whatever, or fallen down the depth chart. I'm curious to see what players that the Broncos try to showcase for potential trades.
Oh yeah.
Seeing if they can't, flip a couple of these guys and get some add additional draft ammunition for this. And yeah, that's kind of what I'm looking at. And then we do have a comment here that I'll grab in just a second.
Who's your last guy to sneak onto the roster? It's like Beatty. You think he makes it?
I think there is a good discussion to have about Tyler Beatty over Blake Watson. Tyler Beatty has looked great. He had a phenomenal run that was called back again for holding against the Packers. So his stats don't look the best, but he's quick. He's explosive. He can catch the ball. He's not the best blocker, but I would say he's better than Blake Watson. But he doesn't have the ball security issues that Blake Watson has.
Yeah.
Which is why I would not be surprised if Tyler Beatty takes that 4th spot over Blake Watson.
Okay.
But we have this comment here, and then Green Bay has a lot of linebackers on the roster, and any one of them that's released would be a good addition to our linebacker room. Yes, and I'm trying to pull up here because their starters are well known. They have McDuffie and Walker, who have been really good, and they have brought in Edgerrin Cooper and Tyrone Hopper as well. And then there's Erick Wilson, who played, I believe, with Sean Payton with the Saints for a year or two, that has some starting experience. There is, let me see here. Sorry, he's the only one that really pops to mind. The other position I was looking at was a cornerback, or the other name that caught my eye was a cornerback. So Erick Wilson wouldn't be one that I wouldn't be surprised if they kind of took a look at. And I am mistaken, he did not play with Sean Payton in New Orleans. When he was with New Orleans, it was that year Sean Payton was off. But one thing that you do when you are trying to find players from other teams, look at the strengths of those teams. Like, obviously, you don't want to take a player that was cut from, say, an offensive tackle from a team that is starting to bad tackles. They don't have like good depth at the position. You want to get a tackle that was cut from a team that is good at the tackle position. And then before we get out of here, you kind of asked about who was my last guy to make the roster. Before you mentioned about Beatty, and I do have a 53-man roster projection up on milehighhuddle.com. You guys can go check it out. Once we get the 53-man roster done, I'm going to do a little reaction to that, comparing where I went off, where I was incorrect, and everything like that. But my final guy was Demontre Jacobs, as a 4th tackle.
Okay.
He's been the best offensive lineman in this preseason. Although Matt Pert and Calvin Throckmorton are not far behind him. I think that he is ahead of Alex Palczewski, who has struggled both at tackle and guard. But I would not be surprised at all if they keep Alex Palczewski, just because they've already bet on him. They've already spent some time really kind of working on him. They really liked him last year. He made the initial roster last year before going on injury reserve. And Demontre Jacobs was terrible last year and then managed to make the preseason or make the practice squad and looks so much better this year. So that is one of the things that I'm looking out for is, can Demontre Jacobs cement himself on the roster? Because I think that he has made a very good case to do so.
What do you have for the future of JL Skinner?
So safeties and corners, you typically keep 10, whether split 6 and 4 or 5 and 5. So the roster math there matters, because if it's only 4 safeties, I don't have a roster spot for him. I think Keidron Smith has vastly outplayed him. JL Skinner has been very rough on defense, been all right on special teams. So it would go PJ Locke, Brandon Jones, Devin Key, Keidron Smith. And then if they do keep 5 and 5, 5 corners, 5 safeties, then I think that's JL Skinner's pathway onto the roster.
Okay.
And then that was actually a good time because Chase Woolner coming in asking about Keidron Smith, the undrafted safety.
Keidron Smith's the one who got the 2 interceptions, correct?
Yes. And I believe we have Lance and I did one of the videos we did was hidden gems for the preseason. Make sure you guys check that out on the Mile High Huddle YouTube channel. And I believe one of them we talked about was Keidron Smith, who, as we said, has 2 interceptions. And going back to the 2022 preseason, there have only been 5 players, not counting Smith, with at least 2 interceptions.
Oh, wow.
There were 2 in 2020 or 2023, and then 3 in 2022. So 5 players, and Keidron Smith makes 6. So, and all of them, I believe, made their initial roster, and 2 of them have gone on to be pretty decent safeties in the NFL as a rotational player. So turnovers can translate.
Have you been watching any of the quarterback coaches or former quarterbacks breaking down the Knicks gameplay? I saw the Kurt Warner one recently.
I saw, who was it? I want to say JT O'Sullivan's and Chase Daniels, I believe, are the ones I've watched.
Okay.
And yeah, I think they both do a good job. I think they both highlight, some of the strengths and everything, and some of the concerns. But one thing I have issue with doing those, and it's like that with any, kind of talk thing, you can always tell which way their bias kind of leans. Chase Daniel has always been very high on Bo Nix, and he doesn't hide that fact. Whereas JT O'Sullivan has always been a little bit sour on Bo Nix, and he has never hidden that fact. So it makes it a little bit hard to for me to watch them because of that. But I still do, because there's still a lot that I can learn from them.
Yeah, I watch Tim Jenkins sometimes. I like the Warner one was breaking down. He's like, yeah, he did the right thing, but he's like, I would have read it this way because this would have happened. It was something about rating it outside in, and they read it inside out.
Yeah.
Or if they would have just waited for a split second, something would have broken open even more. But it's really cool to see that stuff and see how it breaks down and what their decision-making process and how they make their decisions.
Yeah.
It's really interesting.
And then Todd asking if I would go to the Iditarod this year. I have never been to the Iditarod kickoff. Or what is it called? There's a special name for it, and I can't think of it now. It's a big old festival thing. But I've never been to it. I've always wanted to go, and one of these years, maybe I'll take my family to it, but never been. And then Zach Powers comes in with what's got to be our final question, but it's a very good question. Am I being too quick to think that Moss might not be as good as comments out of camp? He looks slowish and always in trail technique. Am I being too harsh? His preseason action has been rough, and I absolutely found it funny that he got beat deep and it was an overthrow, and he gets up celebrating like he had a great play. And there was a tweet that had the video of it, and he says he's fully embraced the act of being a great corner, because every great corner does that. It'll be a deep shot that's overthrown, and they come up acting like they had this great play. The defensive back comes up, they had the good play, and it wasn't. It was just an overthrow. Riley Moss had that, but I do also question, because in preseason action, they're not throwing the full defense at them. They're just throwing very basic stuff at opponents. I do wonder how much of that is for the reason of the change of it, as to why Riley Moss in camp is getting all this praise, whereas Riley Moss in game isn't getting as many comments, because even comments that have from padded practices have been absolutely great. So that for me might be for it. I'm willing to give him a couple weeks to see what he can show in the regular season, when defenses get a little bit more complicated, offenses get a little bit more complicated, and see how he can adjust to that.
They made this funny video where it was an overthrow like that. It was like a vine or whatever. And the guy's like, no fly zone. And they're like, no, it's an overthrow. He's like, no fly zone. And it's like over and over. It's like, dude, you had nothing to do with that play.
Thank you, Todd. Ferrandi. That's what it's called. It's the Ferrandi. It's a big old festival. It has its own little mascot. One of the, funner Alaskan experiences that you can have from people that I've heard from people who have gone, because again, I've never been. Malachi Martin coming in with a $5 super chat. Thank you, Malachi. We appreciate that. We appreciate all of your guys' support. Who is your choice for the worst draft pick in Broncos history? Mine is Alphonso Smith. Is Alphonso Smith the safety or the player that Josh McDaniels traded the future first-round pick?
It was.
That is my pick right there, because that first-round pick ended up being Earl Thomas. Alphonso Smith is the worst pick in Broncos history.
Oh, Earl Thomas. The hotel bedroom what did he do? He was something crazy.
I can't remember, but man, he was a great
not in the
safety
league
for so
anymore.
many years.
But it was something with his brother. Like they were like partying together. They hadn't. Anyway. But the worst from me. I would say probably Jarvis Moss.
Jarvis Moss was a bad one.
Just because I was so hyped for him. He had like 4 sacks in that national championship game. And I was like, oh, this guy's going to kill it. And then, yeah, nothing.
That's a good one. I think there's an argument to be made for Paxton Lynch. But I still don't think Paxton Lynch would be in the top 5 for me, but I'm not sure if he'd be in the top 3. Because Jarvis Smith was really, really bad. Who was it? I can't remember his name now off the top of my head. I'll have to pull up the Broncos draft history here. There's another guy who, like, a lot of people were super hyped about, and I was not overly sold on. I don't know why it's not who I'm thinking of, but can we have a conversation about Tim Tebow as being one?
I was thinking about that too, just because they could have got him so much later. I wasn't really about his play, but like
I get he won a playoff game for us, but I mean, it also was very divisive for the fan base and just so many other issues. Shane Ray, that's the other one that I was thinking of that has a case to be top 3.
The Tebow thing, I used to cause fights, just like trolling people. I would walk up and people were talking, and I was like, "What do y'all think about Tebow?" And just like walk off, and like one person would always love him, and the other person would hate him, or not hate him, but just wasn't a believer or whatever. And it turned into a huge argument. It's just pretty funny.
All right, now we got one more super chat in here before we got to get out of here. Vlazify with a $10 donation coming in saying, "Hey, MHH fam, super random, but Eric, your face looks slimmer. Keep it up. What are your thoughts on Wattenberg starting?" I'm cautiously optimistic about Wattenberg starting. As for my face looking slimmer, I am right on the cusp of getting under 300 pounds. Stepped on the scale this morning and I was at 301 point something. And what I do is I weigh myself every morning and then I average out over the week to kind of give myself an estimate. So I'm getting really close. One of my goals is to be under 300 by the time the meet and greet. Just staying in a calorie deficit. I've adjusted to it. I'm not feeling hungry all the time anymore. And then working out a little bit when I can and where I can. Especially now we homeschool my daughter, so my time to work out has gotten a lot more limited, as well as season picking up, so work is picking back up. But yeah, that's all it is just staying in a calorie deficit and being careful of what I'm eating, paying attention more to, not binging on junk food, weighing out what I eat, making sure I'm, very strict on my calories of how many I have when I have regiments. Like I have 435 calories in the morning for breakfast, which includes some vitamins and stuff like that. But yeah, that's all I'm doing. And thank you so much for that. And yeah, it makes me feel good. So appreciate it. So what are your thoughts on Wattenberg starting?
I think he's earned it. It wasn't the hardest thing to earn, but he earned it. It's almost like the Bo Nix thing, whatever. Like it's like, yeah, you won starter, but who did you beat out? But I'm cautiously optimistic as well that he's gonna be able to pull his weight. He's been there for a while, so he's pretty accustomed to the system. And Bo Nix's release is lightning quick, so that's gonna only help him out even more.
Yeah, I'm really curious to see how much he can help out with taking pressure off of Bo Nix with making calls at the line. That's where a lot of praise was early on in camp as to why he was starting to take the job. So I'm curious to see if that can translate into game. And then last comment here, Todd Ossendorf, don't drink alcohol if you want to lose weight. It's a good thing I've never been a big alcohol drinker. Only time I drink is at the meet and greet. That is my yearly time where I, kind of relax a little bit and let go. And I made a joke after the first meet and greet that we had that I had more alcohol in the 2 days that I was down there than I had in the previous 30 some or 29, however old I was, years of my life prior to that. I'm just never been a big drinker.
It's pretty high altitude where you're at too, right? Or is it?
Not really. I basically live right on the ocean, right on
Okay.
the river.
I know there's mountain ranges and stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah, here, yeah, you got to be careful for that here, drinking in Colorado, because it'll sneak up on you real quick with the altitude.
Yeah. But anyways, guys, that is going to do it for us tonight. I hope you guys had a great time. I know I did. It's always great to sit here and talk about Broncos football with those of you in the chat, and of course with you, Kenneth. It's going to be a great season that we're going to sit here and be breaking down, the upcoming games and talking about a little bit about what's going on throughout the season. But as always, we got some matter of business before we get out of here. Make sure, as you guys can see on the ticker scrolling on the bottom, make sure you guys subscribe, like, and share. That is one of the easiest ways, and it doesn't cost any money to help spread the word about what we do here at Mile High Huddle. All it takes is just a matter of seconds. That's all it costs, 15 seconds of your time. Make sure you guys go to Spotify or Apple Podcasts and leave a 5-star review for a chance to win some, I believe, typically a jersey, could be some other type of swag, as our boss likes to say, each month. You guys can follow us on Instagram at Mile High Huddle with an underscore between mile and high and huddle. Which again, it'll take me a while to get used to the fact that we have an Instagram account. You can, guys, if you want some merch of your own, like this hat that I have here, or some of the WLD Diver shirt, or some of the coffee mugs we have, you guys can go to mhhmerch.com and get your swag on. Make sure you guys are following us on Facebook at facebook.com/Mile High Huddle Pod. You can follow us on Twitter at Mile High Huddle, that's where you can get access to all of our written content, as well as every single show and everything we do, all the videos that we put out. You can follow the Dove Valley Deep Divers Twitter account at DVDD_pod. And as always, thank you guys for tuning in for one of the Mile High Huddle podcasts. We appreciate you guys. We appreciate you guys tuning in every single week, every single night. Shout out to those of you who super chatted and starred: David Papa Bear McElrath, Mike Edel, Malachi Martin, Blazify, Michael Ronquillo, some of the others who may have starred, Erick Flynn, who we may not have been able to show. And Todd, before we get out of here, Todd, do a meet and greet in Alaska, halibut fishing. I have been trying for years to get some of the MHH guys to come up here and go fishing. I have not been successful yet. I have tried to bait Nick. Hey, open invite, man. I know some people who have boats who can get out there. If you come during dip netting season, I live right by the river. We can get you out right by the beach too. Get you out dip netting. I have tried baiting Nick with all the beauty that we have here and all the hiking options, and that hasn't worked. But there are a lot of great things in Alaska if you're an outdoorsy person, which I am not, but I still like to enjoy it every now and then. But anyways, before we get out of here, any last words?
Enjoy your weekend. Have a fun, safe weekend. Like I was saying about downtown, the Civic Center, they're having that barbecue fest at the Civic Center Park this weekend. And then over on 19th and Lawrence, they're having a Spirit of Japan festival going on. So get out with your family, get out with your friends, be safe, don't drink too much, and just enjoy what Colorado has to offer, or whatever your community where you're at has to offer before it gets too cold.
The Japan thing would be really interesting for me. I love Japanese culture. That is the one country I would love to visit.
I'm going there. My little sister, that's her graduation present. She was like, I want to go here. And I was like, all right, I'll start saving. She's got a few more years. So
yeah, I mean, one of these days I'll be able to go there. But that is one place that I've always wanted to visit. But anyways, guys, thank you guys for tuning in. As Kenneth said, stay safe. Have a great weekend. Enjoy yourself. Spend time with your family. Get outside. But hopefully we will be here next Friday talking about a Broncos win, going 3-0 in the preseason, and taking a look at the Broncos roster, because roster cutdowns are on Tuesday. Got to get down to the 53-man roster. And this year, they don't have to make the initial roster to get put on injured reserve anymore. They changed those rules for that. So we'll get a pretty definitive answer as to the 53-man roster there probably Wednesday because of some, waiver claims and all that. Thank you guys for tuning in. Again, have a great weekend. Stay safe. Go Broncos.